Ethan Cole wasn't looking for love. After losing his wife 3 years ago in a tragic highway accident, his entire world revolved around his 7-year-old son Tyler. Life had forced Ethan into survival mode. Early mornings, late nights, juggling handyman jobs across town, and just trying to put a warm meal on the table each night. The town of Rock Hollow wasn't exactly a place for second chances. It was a dusty, fading place, half forgotten by the rest of the world. But for Ethan, it was a quiet place to raise his boy, even if every day felt like walking uphill in a storm. Then came Lila Raymond. She arrived back in Rock Hollow like a ghost returning home. No one expected her to come back. Not after the way she left years ago. The townsfolk remembered the scandals, the whispers of how she'd run off with a stranger and left her mother to die alone. No one cared to ask for the truth, and when she returned to inherit her late mother's only possession, a long, abandoned gas station on the edge of town, no one offered her a warm welcome. Just cold stares and tightened lips. The gas station was an eyesore. The paint was peeling, the pumps rusted, and weeds clawed their way through the cracked concrete. But Lila showed up every morning without fail. She wore work gloves too big for her hands and carried buckets of cleaning supplies, like someone determined to fight a war she'd already lost. People drove past, rolled their eyes, and made jokes at the diner. "She's trying to fix that dump. She must be crazier than we thought." But not Ethan. He'd noticed her from the first morning she came back. Something about the way she moved, quiet, deliberate, but proud, reminded him of himself. She wasn't there to win anyone's approval. She was simply trying to rebuild something out of the ruins of her past. He understood that kind of pain all too well. Still, he kept his distance. Between raising Tyler, scraping together enough work to cover rent, and trying not to collapse at night, Ethan didn't have time for anything, or anyone, else. Then came the storm. It was one of those surprise Oklahoma spring storms, the kind that rolled in like an angry beast. Ethan had been working across town and left Tyler under the care of his neighbor. When he got home and saw the empty porch and the back gate wide open, panic surged through him like lightning. He ran into the yard, calling his son's name through the pouring rain. He found Tyler nearly 30 minutes later, curled up on a chair inside the old gas station's dusty office, a blanket around his shoulders and a steaming cup of cocoa in his hands. Lila sat across from him, calm as ever, reading from an old children's book. When she looked up and saw Ethan, she stood slowly, her expression unreadable. "I found him wandering near the ditch," she said. "He said he was chasing a frog." Ethan looked at Tyler, whose cheeks burned with guilt. "I'm sorry, Dad," he muttered. "I didn't mean to scare you." Ethan knelt beside his son, hugged him tightly, then turned to Lila. "Thank you," he said, meeting her eyes for the first time. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Lila shrugged, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "He needed shelter. I gave him that, that's all." But it wasn't all. That moment, so simple, so human, shifted something inside Ethan. The next day, he stopped by the gas station with a box of donuts for her. She looked surprised but accepted them with a quiet nod. The following week, he dropped off some old tools she could use. Over time, their brief exchanges turned into real conversations. Ethan learned that Lila hadn't run away with anyone. She had left town to escape her abusive stepfather, and her mother, caught in a toxic marriage, had begged her to go. When her mother fell ill years later, Lila returned, only to find she had already passed. The townspeople never knew the truth because they never asked. Ethan listened, really listened, and for the first time, Lila began to speak freely. Tyler took to her quickly. She was patient, never treated him like a child to be managed, but as a person whose thoughts mattered. She let him help her repaint the gas station's front office, even letting him pick the color. Bright turquoise, to match the marbles in his favorite comic book hero's eyes. Slowly, the place began to change. So did the people in it. By the time summer rolled around, Ethan found himself looking forward to his visits. He started stopping by not just to drop off tools or help fix a leaky pipe, but because he wanted to see her smile. He wanted to hear her laugh, soft and rare, but beautiful when it came, and Lila, in turn, found herself letting down the walls she'd kept up for years. Two lonely people, broken by life in different ways, had found something rare in each other: understanding, connection, a second chance. Neither of them knew it yet, but beneath the dusty ground they stood on, beneath that crumbling gas station, a secret lay buried that would change everything. But for now, all that mattered was the gentle spark growing between them, one that no gossip or storm could extinguish. As the months rolled by, the connection between Ethan and Lila deepened into something undeniable. It wasn't dramatic or filled with grand gestures, but rather built on everyday moments, shared meals, paint-stained hands, late-night talks under the stars. It was Tyler who first began calling Lila Mum, without realizing it. He said it softly one afternoon while handing her a wrench, and though she froze for a moment, a tear slid down her cheek before she smiled and accepted it without correction. It was in that quiet moment that Ethan knew. This woman was no longer just a friend or even a partner. She was family. The town continued to whisper. Rock Hollow wasn't kind to change. Some folks liked to hold on to their memories of who Lila had been, or who they imagined she was. Others questioned Ethan's judgment, wondered why a hard-working man like him would tie himself to a woman with a troubled past and nothing to her name but a rotting gas station. But Ethan had long since learned to ignore the opinions of people who never offered to help when he was drowning. What mattered was how Lila looked at Tyler like he was the sun. What mattered was the way she made Ethan laugh again, even on the hardest days. They married on a golden September afternoon. There was no church, no grand hall. Just the wide stretch of land behind the gas station, now cleared and dressed with folding chairs and strings of paper lanterns. A friend of Ethan's who worked as a part-time pastor officiated. Tyler stood proudly between them, holding the rings. Lila wore a simple cream dress she had sewn herself, and Ethan wore his father's old suit jacket, a little too snug at the shoulders. They said their vows beneath the setting sun, promising not riches or perfection, but honesty, patience, and a shared hope for something better than the lives they'd escaped. Their life together wasn't glamorous, but it was filled with purpose. They turned part of the old station's convenience store into a small kitchen where Lila began baking pies and cookies. Word spread quickly. People may not have loved Lila, but her cherry pie won over even the most sour-faced regulars. Ethan turned his repair skills toward restoring the interior, fixing the walls, rewiring the lights, and even getting the old walk-in freezer to work again. They stocked shelves with essentials, milk, bread, canned goods, enough to serve the scattered neighbors who otherwise had to drive miles to the nearest grocery store. They weren't rich, but for the first time in a long time, they weren't scraping to survive either. Ethan began turning down odd jobs so he could spend more time at home. Tyler thrived. His grades improved, his laughter returned, and he often helped Lila in the kitchen or Ethan in the small garage Ethan converted into a workshop. Slowly, the gas station, once considered the town's biggest eyesore, became a small but beloved stop for travelers and locals alike. One rainy afternoon, about 6 months into their marriage, Ethan decided to tackle the last part of the station they hadn't touched, the old storage room in the back. It had always been a mess, piled high with dusty boxes, broken tools, and moldy insulation. While clearing out the clutter, he noticed something odd, a crack in the wall behind a rusted shelf. Curious, he pulled the shelf aside and felt along the wall, his fingers finding a faint seam running vertically. He called Lila over. Together, they pried away a thin panel of plywood, revealing a heavy metal door. There was no label, no knob, just a steel lock embedded in the center, old and corroded but still intact. It looked nothing like the rest of the station, more like something from a government facility than a country gas stop. Ethan's curiosity turned into unease. "You ever see this before?" he asked, and Lila shook her head, eyes wide. Not once. They spent the next few days trying to figure out how to open it. Lila combed through her mother's old things, hoping to find a key or some sort of explanation, while Ethan contacted a retired locksmith he knew from Tulsa. When the man finally arrived and cracked the lock open with a combination of tools and ancient expertise, the door groaned open with a hiss of stale, dry air. A narrow staircase led downward, lit only by the weak beam of Ethan's flashlight. The steps creaked underfoot as they descended slowly, their breaths shallow, hearts pounding. The air was cold, unnaturally so, and the space seemed untouched by time. At the bottom was a concrete room, walls lined with dusty metal crates, some sealed with military-grade fastenings, others stamped with strange codes and foreign symbols. Ethan's jaw clenched as he stepped forward. "What the hell is this?" Lila ran her hand along one of the crates, brushing away dust until the letters became visible property of U.S. government. "Do not tamper." Suddenly, the gas station didn't feel so ordinary anymore. The discovery shook them both. What had they just uncovered? Why had Lila's grandfather hidden it? And how had it gone unnoticed all these years? The questions swirled like a storm on the horizon. Whatever they had found wasn't just old junk. It was a secret buried beneath their feet, and they were now the keepers of it. But what that secret truly meant, they had yet to uncover. The days that followed their discovery felt like walking through a dream. Ethan and Lila couldn't shake the feeling that they'd stumbled into something far bigger than themselves. The concrete vault beneath the gas station was cold and silent, untouched for decades, like a tomb sealed away from history. Every crate they opened offered more questions than answers. Rows of antique firearms wrapped in oilcloths, stacks of fragile documents in foreign languages, and trunks filled with medals, maps, and wartime communication devices. The air was heavy with age and secrecy, and they both knew instinctively that this was no ordinary storage room. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor one night, gently unrolling an aged map that crackled at the edges. "These markings, they're not English," she murmured, tracing them with her finger. Ethan crouched beside her, his flashlight beam sweeping across the yellowed paper. "Russian," he guessed. Or maybe German. Neither of them had the expertise to be sure. That's when Lila remembered the box of her grandfather's belongings stored in the attic of the house next door. The house her mother had lived in until her passing. That house had always been off limits emotionally. Too many memories. Too much pain. But now it might hold the key to unraveling the mystery buried under their feet. The next morning, they dug through the attic. In a dusty trunk, they found journals written in her grandfather's handwriting. Neat, careful script. Pages were filled with cryptic notes, codes, and references to the vault. One entry stood out, dated 1980. The government said they'd come back for it. They never did. "I won't let this history disappear. I'll protect it until they return, or until someone finds it who understands what it's worth." Beneath that entry was a list of inventory numbers, some matching the labels on the crates below. Realizing they were sitting on what could be a significant historical discovery, Ethan reached out to his friend Marcus Bishop, a retired military historian and collector now working as a private consultant. Marcus arrived 2 days later, and the moment he stepped into the underground room, his mouth dropped open. "Do you have any idea what this is?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. "These are lost military caches, some of them from Black Ops missions during WWII. Some of this stuff never made it to public archives. If authentic, this is beyond rare. It's priceless." Ethan's mind reeled. How priceless are we talking? Marcus paced slowly between the crates. If this was handled correctly, preserved, authenticated, and auctioned, the combined value could exceed $200 million. Maybe more. Lila sank into a chair, speechless. The woman who once had nothing, who had inherited a gas station no one wanted, was now sitting atop a historic treasure trove. But instead of excitement, a strange heaviness settled in the room. "What do we do now?" she asked quietly. Marcus advised discretion. "This discovery is monumental, but if word gets out before it's properly handled, you'll have every collector, media outlet, and fortune hunter knocking on your door. Worse, if the government finds out too soon, they might try to seize everything before your rights are secured." Then Ethan and Lila agreed to keep it secret for now. They hired a lawyer and began the slow process of legally documenting and securing the site. Marcus helped arrange for a discreet appraisal team to begin cataloging and authenticating the items. Each crate revealed more astonishing finds: rare gold coins used to fund resistance movements, original battle plans, even a Nazi-issue Enigma machine thought to be destroyed after the war. Some crates contained items that weren't even listed in any known records. Lila began to feel as though she was standing in the shadows of ghosts, of her grandfather, who had carried this secret for so long, of her mother, who never told her the truth, and of a world that had forgotten this place even existed. Why didn't he say anything? She wondered aloud one evening as she stood at the top of the staircase, looking down into the vault. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Maybe he was waiting for the right person to find it, he said softly. Someone who wouldn't just sell it to the highest bidder, but someone who would understand the weight of it. As the inventory grew, so did the challenges. A nosy reporter in town noticed a few strange visitors coming and going from the gas station. Rumors began to swirl again. Only this time they weren't about Lila's past. Whispers of money, of treasure, of something buried spread through Rock Hollow like wildfire. One morning, Ethan found tire tracks leading off the back road, as if someone had been lurking nearby. He reinforced the doors, installed cameras, and notified the sheriff. But it was clear that secrecy wouldn't last forever. Still, the couple remained grounded. They didn't go on shopping sprees or flash wealth. Ethan kept working. Lila kept baking. Tyler kept going to school. On the outside, nothing had changed. But deep beneath their feet, a buried legacy waited to rise. A legacy that had chosen them, unlikely as it seemed, to carry it forward. And in that quiet place where love and history collided, Ethan and Lila began to understand that the real fortune wasn't just in what they'd found underground, but in how far they had come above it. Lowly, steadily, Rock Hollow began to feel the ripple effect of Ethan and Lila's discovery. What had once been a town teetering on the edge of irrelevance started stirring with new energy. Word eventually got out. There was no way to keep a 200 million secret buried forever. A leaked photo of a WWII artifact posted anonymously online sparked the interest of collectors, historians, and eventually major news outlets. Within weeks, the tiny gas station at the edge of town was at the center of national headlines. But by the time reporters and experts descended on Rock Hollow, Ethan and Lila had already taken steps to protect themselves and the vault. With the help of legal counsel and Marcus Bishop, they formed a foundation dedicated to historical preservation, naming it after Lila's grandfather, the Raymond Heritage Trust. The foundation owned the artifacts, ensuring that they would never be lost to private collectors or hidden away in vaults again. Major museums from around the country expressed interest in hosting rotating exhibitions of the items. One particular display, featuring the Enigma machine and decrypted documents from covert operations, was set to tour the Smithsonian. For Ethan and Lila, the financial windfall was substantial, but not reckless. They accepted a portion of the appraised value through sponsorship deals, exhibit revenue, and licensing rights. That money, instead of inflating their lifestyle, was poured back into Rock Hollow. They used part of it to fully restore the gas station, not as a fuel stop, but as a one-of-a-kind roadside cafe and museum, a space that paid tribute to history, community, and quiet resilience. They hired local tradespeople to help with the renovations, including some of the very neighbors who had once turned their backs on Lila. It wasn't long before those same people began looking at her differently, not with suspicion or judgment, but with respect and a bit of awe. It was hard not to admire the woman who had turned a derelict building into a national landmark and who had chosen to reinvest in the town, instead of abandoning it for a mansion somewhere else. The new Raymond Station Cafe and Museum opened with a ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by state officials, reporters, and military historians from around the country. Tyler was the one who cut the ribbon, smiling proudly in front of cameras, standing between his parents, his world finally whole. Visitors poured in by the thousands over the next few months, revitalizing local businesses that had long been struggling. The once quiet streets of Rock Hollow buzzed with new life. New shops opened, tourism boomed, and community pride returned in a way few had believed possible. But amid all the growth, Ethan and Lila remained grounded. They still woke up early each morning. Lila still baked pies by hand. Ethan still worked in the garage out back, now restored and fitted with vintage decor. Tyler still helped after school stacking shelves, wiping tables, and proudly telling guests about the secret vault under our feet. They had more now, but their hearts remained anchored in simplicity. One chilly autumn evening, after the cafe had closed for the night and the town had gone quiet, Ethan and Lila stood beneath the stars outside the gas station, the neon sign glowing gently behind them. Tyler had already gone to bed, exhausted from telling the story of the Enigma machine to a group of fascinated school kids. "You ever think this is all a dream?" Lila asked softly, leaning into Ethan's side. "All the time," he replied with a smile. "But then I wake up next to you and remember it's real." She laughed quietly. "I never thought I'd be here. I thought I'd spend my life proving I wasn't the girl they thought I was." "You never had to prove anything," Ethan said. "You were always enough, they just didn't see it. But I did. And now, the whole world sees it." They stood there in silence for a moment, the cool breeze rustling the leaves and the hum of the town drifting in the distance. So much had changed, and yet the most important things had remained the same. Family, love, and the quiet dignity of two people who refused to give up on each other or themselves. Later that night, Lila wrote a final entry in her grandfather's journal, placing it in a sealed case next to his old uniform in the museum exhibit. "You protected the past, Grandpa. And now, we'll protect the future. Your secret didn't just change our lives. It saved a town, restored a name, and gave us a purpose we never saw coming. Thank you for trusting us with it. We'll honor it, always." The journal sat quietly in its display, a symbol of generational redemption. Visitors read it, many with tears in their eyes, touched not just by the artifacts but by the love story intertwined with them. The gas station, once a crumbling ruin, had become a beacon, not just of history, but of hope. And for Ethan, Lila, and Tyler, it would forever be the place where their second chance had begun and a legacy far greater than money had been unearthed.